We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to an edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Welcome to April. It's tax season. Everybody get those taxes in.
We are recording this on April 1st, but there will be no April Fool's jokes because I hate them.
Yeah, no April Fool's jokes from us. That's how would you even tell these days? How could you tell?
It's all the same.
Yes.
I will tell you that my wife, so my son came home from college and he was coughing, but he wasn't sick. And now my wife is coughing. And she is definitely sick.
Yeah, you said she was ill last week, and you were certain that you were going to get it.
Yes, and historically,
sure,
I get an illness. I'm very sick, and my wife's like, "I've got it. It's not that bad. I don't understand why you're being such a baby about it."
Okay.
And then this time, she is very sick, and has been very sick for over a week now. And I am maybe a little under the weather. My voice is bothering me today, so you may see me pop a cough or hear me on the podcast pop a cough drop to help soothe my throat. Something's falling off this desk, and I have to do something about it, but I will in a second.
Aside from your microphone that keeps falling down.
My microphone I cannot figure out this stupid stand. Should I read the instructions? I should. Will I read the instructions? I will not. Because okay. So I wanted to buy crema, which is a Mexican, I think. I don't know, Latin American, like white cream thing. I don't know what it is. But I saw somebody make something with it, and I was like, well, I want to try that. So I went to go buy crema at the store, which I know that at other grocery stores of the same brand, the same chain, I have seen it there. Okay. So it makes me believe that even though I was at a different one, it is there somewhere. But because the layout of that store is different than the layout of the store I know, I could not find it. Okay. Now, you would say, especially if you are a woman listening to this podcast, and hi, welcome. I didn't realize that happened. But if you are a woman listening to this podcast, you would say, you should have just asked somebody. No.
Okay, yeah.
If I cannot find it, I do not deserve to have it.
Oh, okay.
And that is my
you didn't go to the
motto.
If you can't find it, it does not exist. I thought that's
not that. No, I don't. It's there. I am sure it's there. I am positive that if I had asked somebody, I would have it now in my house. Then I would be using it right now. And in fact, to go along with the crema, I would have also bought the ingredient that I forgot to buy for the chutney that I was there for in the first place.
All right.
So I forgot to buy an ingredient, but if I would have bought it for the crema, if I found the crema, but I did not, and now I have to go back to the store. Will I go back and ask for the crema? I will not. I will not. If I can't find it, I don't deserve it. That is how it works in my brain.
It doesn't show up on the website of telling you what aisle it might be in or anything like that?
There is a website for this chain of grocery stores, and I will not use it because if I cannot find it, I do not deserve to have it. That is how it works. Now, some of you are like, Google Maps, that's for the week, and you need to figure stuff out for yourself, and then that way you'll really know it.
I
definitely
blah. Use our online maps. That is very useful information.
This is the same sort of thing. And I don't judge anybody else for asking questions, and getting
Nor should you. That is a very reasonable thing to do, honestly.
That's a very if it was something I was buying for my wife or for somebody else, I would definitely ask about it. But in this case, it was a purchase that I didn't really need. It was just something I wanted to try out, and I figured, if I can't find it, I don't deserve it. So I do that often at Home Depot or the Lowe's or whatever the big chain store is that I'm going to that has hardware and stuff. If I can't find it there, then I guess I wasn't meant to do that project today. So I have the same sort of attitude. And it's that same attitude I have about this microphone stand.
Okay.
If I can't figure it out, I don't deserve to know how it works.
I was going to say we need to work our way back through, I think we're 3 tangent layers down at this point.
Don't worry, I'm getting
Inception
there.
Onion. So
I'll bring it back around.
We'll work our way back. Okay, yeah.
I will say that Andrew Andrew of AV Gadgets fame did like my dramatic pause last week before my name.
Yes, that's right.
He texted me. He was like, and I am dramatic pause. Tom Andrew. He's like, jeez, I guess. I wasn't the only one that was embarrassed. I think there was secondhand embarrassment going on. But yes, that is sort of the way my weekend has gone. My entire weekend has been sort of a crap fest. And I am in a bad mood. And surely somebody on this podcast will receive the other end of that. And I apologize in advance if I sound extra surly with you or short or
might
mad.
not be deserved. All right.
It's not you.
Yeah.
It is me. Dog, shut up. I am in a bad mood. What is this falling off my desk? What is happening?
It's just a shambles over here. I thought I was the one who was like late and disorganized this morning, but look how we do over here.
It's my son's desk. It's not my desk. My desk would not look like this. My desk would be much cleaner than this. There's things happening. Rob, what did you watch? Or what's going on in your life? I suppose we should ask you that.
Well, I don't have much updates, which like I kind of alluded to last week, I'm a bit thankful for. I will take a calm week in my life behind the scenes, absolutely. So yeah, no major updates, which is a good thing. Don't be like, oh, poor Rob having a boring week. No, I will take it. I will absolutely take it. So that's been all fine. So yeah, we can talk about what we watched. I watched one movie this week. I was sort of aiming to watch two, but just didn't get around to it. But before I get to the movie, I'll just quickly update. I did finish up Invincible Season 3. So I did enjoy this season. I enjoyed it more than Season 2. I did not enjoy it as much as Season 1, if we're ranking them. But they are sort of drawing out the story for sure. Like the seasons don't have satisfying conclusions. They're not even particularly gigantic cliffhangers. They just kind of are telling a clearly much longer story. All the setup is there. We're aware of it, but yeah, you're having to kind of wait quite a while to see where this is all going to play out, and it just kind of stops in what seems like the middle of a season than actually feeling like a really satisfying Season 3 conclusion. Even though they put in the sort of little bit of a montage to give you a quick sort of snapshot of where all the major characters are at the end of this season. It's it doesn't really feel like a full story beat that's going on there. And then my major criticism is I don't think it's playing it for satire or parody. This is absolutely nothing new in comic book stories, but death is just utterly meaningless. Nobody dies. Everybody you think is dead comes back. And it's like you've got all these ridiculous, Superman level powered individuals and heroes and aliens and stuff. So it's like, so why are they punching each other? Like it means utterly nothing, for these characters to be punching each other at this point, because they can't be hurt, they can't be killed. Even if they seem like they're hurt or killed, they just come right back, and it's kind of like like there are no stakes once you get to that point, which a show like One Punch Man hilariously parodies, right? I mean, that's the whole point. He's like, okay, here's a character who's so strong and so invincible, but we're going to make fun of that, and that makes it fun. And you're going to have these enemies doing their huge long monologues, and then he's One Punch Man, they're gone in one punch, and he's disappointed by that fact, and that's what makes the show and the manga awesome. But in Invincible, it doesn't seem like they're playing it for parody. They're trying to have these moments of like, oh no, that person got obliterated. They're fine. It's just kind of like, it's really, really takes the stakes away. So, I don't know. It's a bit tough to really be super in love with it from that point of view. However, like I say, Season 3 was enjoyable, so I'm hoping that by the time they get to all these plot threads that they've thrown out there, I hope they eventually get to them. I hope they find out when the show is going to end so that they actually can wrap up a bunch of these plot threads that they're just dangling out there and we're not left hanging forever. And then, the other one, I've begun Season 2 of Silo. This has been out for a while, but I've only just now resubscribed to Apple TV Plus, so just caught up on the first 2 episodes of Silo Season 2. And my comment here, I really enjoy this show. I have no criticisms on that point of view. The acting is great. The storytelling,
What is
I
Silo
really
about?
enjoy.
Just kind of like quick overview.
Yeah, so it's some indescript amount of time in the future. There has been some kind of catastrophe on Earth, so what remains of the human population lives in silos underground, and the people are basically not sure whether it's actually safe to go out or not. This comes from a novel series that was titled Wool, and so if you are either sent outside the silo for committing a crime, or if anybody asks to be let outside, that is like the number one rule. If you say you want to go outside, you will go outside, and they send you out with this little piece of wool to clean the camera lenses that lets people see what the situation is still like outside. And for some reason, all the people, like especially the criminals who are sent out, they're like, oh, I'm not going to clean. Why would I clean? But then mysteriously, everybody always cleans. And they're like, why does everybody always clean? And there's like a little bit of mystery to it. So yeah, that's the series Silo. But I just wanted to mention, on the technical side of things, holy crow, is this show dimly lit. Like I'm watching it on an OLED, I'm watching it in HDR. That is absolutely vital, because the only alternative would be I see nothing, or I have to boost the black level so much that everything is just a complete wash in gray. But they're going for the realistic of like, if the only light source in this scene in real life is the flashlight that the character is holding, then that's, by golly, going to be the only light that's going to be on screen. And it's just kind of like, I'd forgive a little bit of artistic license for you to have some lights that, yes, in real life would not actually be there, but it is
Isn't
a TV
that why
show.
The ground is always wet in
Right.
exterior scenes?
Yeah.
Like there's always puddles so that there's more light reflecting around, so you can actually
Explain.
see things.
Yes. But I mean, here they're underground in silo bunkers, so you're not going to have moonlight, you're not going to have starlight. If it's dark, it's pitch black dark, and there's like, the glow stick that they have is the only light that they would have in real life, and that's what we're going to do on screen as well. And holy crow, is this a dimly lit show. So yeah, you're going to want to adjust your contrast and brightness levels very correctly on your TV, and then turn all the lights off in your room, because if you have any ambient light in your room, you are not going to see a darn thing in this show. Just be forewarned. But I like the show very much. So with that television watching out of the way, the one movie that I did get around to watching this week is Conclave. So this was another of the nominees for Best Picture at this year's Oscars. This is an adaptation of a novel by Robert Harris of the same title, Conclave. It's directed by Edward Berger and starring Ralph Fiennes, or Rafe Fiennes, I guess he goes by. Even his brother calls him Ralph now, but he's I guess he's still going by Rafe Fiennes professionally. Also starring Stanley Tucci and John Lithgow. So yeah, this is Ralph Fiennes is playing the Dean of Cardinals at the Vatican. Right. The Pope in this story unexpectedly passes away. So this wasn't like there was time and to prepare and all that. He unexpectedly dies. So it's a bit of a rushed conclave, gathering all the cardinals from around the world. They have to be sequestered and vote on who the new pope is going to be. And it's, sort of following just all the machinations and politics, honestly, behind the scenes of all of that. But yes, I mean, this movie is not subtle at all in that clearly the original author perhaps isn't the biggest fan of the Catholic Church, and that maybe doesn't believe that even the cardinals truly believe that whom they choose to be pope is ordained by God, that it's really much more ambitious men and politics and pretty flawed choices going on behind the scenes, and it is not ambiguous or subtle in any way of overtly criticizing the Catholic Church and this whole process in that way. This movie plays out a little bit like a mystery, because we're not entirely sure the circumstances of the Pope's death, and there are all these ambitious people behind the scenes. And yes, it is overtly critical of like how ridiculously patriarchal the system is, and how like there's one cardinal who's brand new. The Pope had just ordained him right before he died, or had done so a little while ago, but nobody knew about it. But he shows up for the conclave and, dares to actually thank the sisters for preparing all the meals and all the rooms and everything like that. And everyone's like shocked that he would mention the sisters who were there. And so, yeah, like I say, it's not the least bit subtle in the sort of criticisms of the Catholic Church, which, of course, is going to raise the ire of many people. And this was a controversial movie. But I mean, through the majority of this movie, we really are following Ralph Fiennes, and they make a point of keying in audibly on his breathing. In fact, the director noted how they brought Ralph Fiennes in for ADR just to breathe into a microphone and then put that audio over this movie so that we're always hearing him breathing, pretty much. And, said that they did that because they, first of all, they want this sort of claustrophobic feeling of being sequestered, that nobody can leave and that they really can't even have any information from the outside world. And we get hints that there are things going on in Rome, in the city around them, but the cardinals are not allowed to know what that is because they're not supposed to let that influence whom they choose as pope, but maybe they should. There's that type of criticism as well. But that they really wanted you to feel like you are right there beside Ralph Fiennes as cardinal the entire time, that you are right there on his shoulder following along, and therefore they have this very audible breathing of his character throughout everything. And it is used to good effect because in the few moments where they drop that sound out, then it is very effective in ratcheting up the tension and, like I say, playing this a bit more like a mystery than anything else. I will also say the score in this movie is very, very pronounced. And I mean, almost all of the tension at the beginning of this movie is only present because of the score. Because the actual scenes that are playing out, even though there's a little bit of, they're not exactly sure it was unexpected for the Pope to die, like the scenes itself are not particularly like suspect or anything like that, but the music is telling you something nefarious is going on, like very clearly. But then I came to appreciate, because this is a loud strings symphonic type of score, sort of loud, abrupt, intense, music that doesn't always seem like it 100% fits with what you're seeing on screen. But I came to appreciate it because that was a bit tongue-in-cheek. It was really kind of making the point of, well, everyone here takes this exceedingly seriously. And the music is like, this is drama, this is tense, this is exciting, this is suspect. But then you're watching like, it's not really that dramatic. It's like, but that was, I believe anyway, I'm pretty sure the point. They're like, they're overdoing it to make a point in everything that's going on here. So, I mean, I won't at all go into the little bit of surprises that come towards the end of this movie. And they are, I mean, there's no way to talk about it without ticking somebody off. So, for both of those reasons, I don't think I'll bother going into any of that whatsoever. And it's a little bit, on the nose, over the top. But again, this movie ends up sort of being a little bit of parody, honestly, that's going on here. So I think if you're willing to go into this movie with that, if you're not going to be offended by that, then I mean, I did enjoy this movie. Again, this isn't one I'd be like, oh, this was the best movie of the year. I mean, very much like Adora, I liked this movie. I thought it was a good movie. It was very well acted. And like I say, I enjoy the sort of parody and the tongue-in-cheekness of it. But I wouldn't have called it the best movie of the year. So, but I'm making my way through. I'm making my way through the nominees, and I want to see how they all are, and I'll make my choice. What I think was the best movie of the year by the time I get through them all.
It can be something that's not on the list too, Rob.
It might be. You never know. But yes, that was my take on Conclave. And I mean, if you're very, very Catholic, then this is not going to be the movie for you. This is definitely being very critical of it, and very rightly so. There was one part that, I mean, I'm not the least bit Catholic, but there was one part that I felt was unfair, honestly. If you're going to be making a criticism of the Catholic Church, I thought it was
plenty of stuff that you can, as a Catholic. And I mean, I was raised Catholic. I can tell you, most Catholics, not all of them, obviously, but most Catholics can look at the church and go, yeah, that's fair enough.
Sure, but
we got that one coming.
There was one part which is not just once in this movie, more than once in this movie. The main cardinal that we're following, who is always portrayed as being a very pious and very straightforward and following the rules type of man, but he will use the act of confession as a means of convenience for learning information, and then shares that information, which you are absolutely not supposed to do. And
that's not supposed to happen.
it just didn't ring true in this movie that this particular cardinal would do that. They were trying to basically show how all of these cardinals are just men and very flawed and all of that stuff. And that, I don't mind having that criticism out there, but I thought the use of confession in this movie, it just didn't ring true. Like, if that's going to be one of the criticisms you're going to make, that one to me felt like unfair and fictionalized, like very fictionalized.
I mean, they generally think of themselves during, at least the way I was told, that they would think of themselves as, therapists in the same way. You might discuss generalities with other priests or other people in order to get some idea of what kind of advice you should be giving to people, but you wouldn't say specifics or identify anybody.
Yeah, it didn't feel like particularly this cardinal would use confession as a tool of convenience. That didn't ring true to me. So that criticism I will back.
Fair enough. Mm-hmm. Right. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your question answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to the website and find our shows, show notes, links to the products and articles we will be referring. Also our Flickr album, so you can follow along with the pictures that we will be talking about and make things a little bit easier for you if you're like, what is Tom describing? Because sometimes I describe it and go, well, I just said it and I don't understand what it means either. So here we go. So check those out. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant. The pictures will be embedded in that video, which is just us talking to each other. Just two heads. Someday we'll be able to do something different than that, but not today. Not today, no. I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support this podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that financially is by going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and send us a PayPal donation that goes into our coffers to help pay for our hosting and website costs and other things. We also have patreon.com/AVRant podcast, where you can be a monthly contributor to the podcast. Every month they take some money from you. I think it's a minimum of $1 and maximum of infinity. Bill Gates ever wants to listen for just a month. Yep. Or if you just want to fall asleep on the zero key, but then, hit enter and confirm at the end. Yes. Don't forget that part. That's right. And then don't dispute the charge. Right. We have 132 patrons at patreon.com, including John, who's in Ireland. So thank you to all of our patrons. That is right. That is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So yeah, big thank you to our 132 patrons over there now. John, thank you very much for being one of them. I know he is a relatively new patron. He let us know. So that's very nice of you, John. Thanks for joining. Thank you. We also got notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from John again. Mm-hmm. I imagine it's the same John. I believe it is. I forget at this point and having made the show notes, but I'm pretty sure it was the same John. Gurinder and Sasi. So thank you to the three of you for thanking us. That's right. John, Gurinder, Sasi, thank you very much for the notes of gratitude and encouragement. We definitely appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. In the news this week, Arendal sounds smaller, less expensive. 1961 series of speakers and subwoofers has returned. Arendal started in 2015 with their 1723 series, which has always remained at their main offering. And back in 2019, they introduced their entry-level models, the 2061. 1961 even. I'm sorry, 1961. I don't know why I don't know why 20 came out of there. I don't know. I think I was glancing up and down to make sure that these were the same one from the beginning of this thing. That's right. So they are 1961. But the 1961 speakers were discontinued about a year and a half ago, and when Arendal's new flagship 1528 series was introduced, it looked as though the company was only going to go up in price points. But happily, this is not the case. Mm-hmm. The 1961 series is back, and you can order them now in either black matte or white matte finish options with magnetic grills, and new Arendal Puck anti-vibration feet. They've got the name. It's Arendal Puck is their anti-vibration feet. They've got magnetic grills. So a little tiny tweak to the original 1961 series that went away a year and a half ago. They're coming back now with anti-vibration feet because those were added with the 1528 flagship series. They developed these new Puck and Puck
Plus, I think, anti-vibration
Puck
feet.
Pro, it says.
Puck Pro, there we go. I knew it was something along those lines. So these come with the Puck feet.
Are they just rubber feet?
They're just rubber feet. Yeah, they're rubber feet.
Or do they go on it? Oh, I'm not confused. Because these look like... They look like they have outriggers. What am I looking at?
They do, yeah. The subwoofers in particular, they're the ones with the Puck feet.
Yeah. And they just sit on... The outriggers sit on top of these pucks that go on the ground?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's the option.
Whatever. That's... Okay.
It's rubber. It's rubber feet.
Whatever. There's a single tower model priced at $1,900 a pair, which is not as inexpensive as I was hoping that this was in the theme,
okay, but that's not terrible for tower speakers. Yeah,
it's not. It features Arendal's 1961 1.1-inch soft dome tweeter in their large, distinctive waveguide that provides wider, more even dispersion and allows for a low crossover point of 1500 hertz to the mid-range drivers in the series. The same 5.5-inch paper drivers are used throughout the entire 1961 series. The tower model has 4 of them in the 2.5-way design. The front baffle is raked back. Line up everything.
Sure.
And it has outrigger feet and 4 ohm nominal impedance. The center is an MTM 2-way design with a sealed cabinet that's just under 6 inches from front to back for $600. Keyhole mounts are included on the back, but Arendal also includes standardized VESA 100 mounting holes to make swivel mounting easy. Their own VESA 100 wall mount costs $29, which is a reasonable price for a wall mount.
Not too bad.
The monitor is the same as the center, but it stands vertically instead of horizontally for $11.50 per pair.
So it's slightly less expensive. $25 less.
It took me a second to figure out the math on
for
that.
Moving the logo from the side to the middle.
Yeah. The bookshelf is a 2-way seal design with just the waveguide mounted tweeter and a single woofer. It goes for $8.50 a pair. And there's a wedge-shaped height speaker, same design and price as a bookshelf, but a wedge.
That's right.
Lastly, there's a dedicated triaxial surround speaker for $9.50 a pair that adds extra tweeters to the left and right sides of the speaker. I guess somebody out there still wants those things.
It's still going back to that. I don't believe this is a dipole type of design. They're all firing in phase, so it's just extra wide dispersion and a little bit of comb filtering for your trouble.
Yeah. There are also 2 1961 subwoofer models: the sealed subwoofer 1S for $1,000 and the ported subwoofer 1V
for vented.
I was going to...
Sealed and vented.
I would say it should be 1P, but I guess I didn't want to put the P in there. For $1,200. So is it bigger?
It is physically larger, and then it has a slot port on the back.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the back. That's weird. Mm-hmm. Arendal has worked very hard on creating one of the largest shipping networks that allows them to ship worldwide from their factory in Norway, while including the shipping costs, taxes, and duties all up front to a large number of countries. They offer a 60-day no-hassle return with return shipping included for some locations. Yeah. Some look up.
You do need to look that up, but I mean they're doing internet direct to consumer sales about as well as you possibly can. I'm not sure exactly what was all going on behind the scenes for when the original 1961s were discontinued and then bringing them back now. But I would believe, because they've done a bunch of work on their supply chain behind the scenes for the past couple of years. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they were sort of rejiggering the supply chain for that lower cost series so that they can really get a proper value out of that for themselves and for their customers. So I like a lot of what Arendal has done, not just with their speakers, because they're solid speakers. Some people, there was like a crazy amount of hype for them when they came out at first, but that was just by getting all the influencers on board, and they did their job, and they brought up a huge amount of hype. I never quite felt that they were needed as much hype as they got, mainly because these are large speakers. These are not changing the design paradigm of how to create a relatively efficient, good sounding speaker. They're not breaking any laws of physics here. They're doing very reasonable things, but that has resulted in very, reasonable, good, well measured sound as well. So I've been very, very okay with getting them. I just didn't think the massive amount of hype that they had at first was totally warranted. But yeah, I really like what they've done as a company by making this as easy as it can possibly be. The price you see is the price you're going to pay. You can change the country listing on their website when you're looking in their online shop, and that's the landed price. That's what you're going to pay. So I like that very much, making it clear and upfront and no hidden costs, and you're going to get. And everybody who has purchased them has said, like, yeah, the shipping experience, the packaging and everything like that, top quality. That they've really gone the extra mile to make sure that these things arrive safely and functionally, and they don't want a bunch of these things coming back to Norway. That is not cheap for them to cover the shipping cost, even if it's only one-way shipping at first. Is not cheap to cover all that and have a bunch of things coming back. So it sounds like they've done their homework, they've done well, and I'm happy to support them in that.
I think they're very good-looking speakers. They're very boxy.
Sure.
I think that whoever takes photographs of these things for their website does a very, very good job.
Okay. With
the lighting and everything. But if you go to their 1961 series, the first review is my highest recommendation, even for those who can afford much more expensive gear. Okay, so in the review world, there's two things I stay away from as much as possible, and that is saying anything along the lines of better than stuff twice the price.
These would be
or
a deal
as
at
good
twice
as
the price.
thing it's at 10 times the price or whatever. Right? It's just a cliche.
It is a cliche at this point.
And it sort of gives me the twitches. But the second one is, and I'll just read the review from their. This is their reviews from their customers, and they choose which ones go first, I'm sure. So the first one was the recommendation for those who can afford much more expensive. The second one is, even my wife was like, those speakers are great. Those are the two things like you just don't say anymore. You just don't say that. And I mean, I understand why they put there, like, these are actual reviews from our customers. Okay, but you chose to put them there, and that just rubs me the wrong way in a lot of ways. It's just sort of a dog whistle for audiophiles, for me. And I like you said, I've heard very good things about these things. Maybe they're great, maybe they're just okay, and many people are just taken by the hype. I think the pictures are phenomenal. I think the look of these speakers, where how the woofers almost go edge to edge on the baffles,
definitely
is a good looking,
slender on the front, and then having that very large waveguide around the tweeter gives it basically the same diameter. That waveguide is the same diameter as the woofers. So everything looks very appealing.
It's symmetrical and it actually gives because like you said, the speakers are very large physically. But when you look at all these drivers and they're taking up almost the entire front baffle, it gives you the illusion that these things are actually smaller than they look.
And I mean, the 1961, they are the physically smallest that Arendal offers, the 1723, the 1528. They do have a 1723S for like slim or small, but they're still bigger than the 1961 series. So these are the smallest ones they have, and they're still not tiny by any means. I wouldn't classify these as compact speakers. So they are wall mountable. The 1961s are wall mountable, but I wouldn't classify them as compact.
Right. Sony has made a rather surprising announcement. They are suspending all further sales of their entire home cinema projector lineup in the UK and Europe. Existing stock will be allowed to be sold to customers, but no further stock will be arriving. Once they're gone, they're gone. So this is not a business decision, though. Their decision is due to new sanctions that have come into effect. Certain parts and materials used in Sony's home cinema projectors come from countries that are now being sanctioned by the UK and Europe. Is that us?
Nope.
I feel like that's us.
Nope. You'll see.
Okay, I'll see. So in order to remain in compliance, Sony says that discontinuing sales in these regions is unavoidable, as they remain committed to abiding by the laws and regulations. So to make it perfectly clear, yes, you can blame Russia's invasion of Ukraine for taking Sony projectors off the store shelves.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that makes sense, I suppose.
Yeah. So, I mean,
even though I feel like it's going to be us eventually.
That was announced a while ago, so they have now come into effect right at the end of February. There is when that happens. So, I mean, the thing is, it's not that you can just say, oh, well, good news for JVC or something like that. I don't actually know JVC's situation. It's certainly not out of the realm of possibility that they're going to be facing this very same circumstance. I don't actually know the news on that side of it, but it's just in Europe and in the UK, as far as home theater projectors go, Sony has been like the clear number one for several years now. I don't believe that's the case in North America, but throughout most of Europe, that has been the case where Sony has been number one. So this is substantial. This isn't just some very small company that was, number 8 in the market, and they're just like, well, we're going to abide by these regulations, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to restock. It's like, no, this was the number one home theater projector supplier in the region, and due to these sanctions, they're having to discontinue restocking their things. So, I mean, obviously, if the conflict ends, the sanctions can be lifted. That would be very good news for Sony and for their customers and for everybody who wants to get one of Sony's home cinema projectors in Europe and in the UK. But barring that, I don't know. It would take time for sure for Sony to like redesign everything to be able to resupply from other parts of the world. That isn't something they can just flick a switch and do. They would have done so if they could have. If it were that simple, they would have just resupplied. So, yeah, discouraging news.
LG has once again dropped DTS audio support in their TVs throughout the new 2025 model lineup. So I hope you enjoyed it while it was there for what, a model year?
2 years.
2 years? Yeah. Okay. LG TVs included DTS audio support up until 2019. Then DTS was gone from 2020 to 2022. DTS support returned from 2023 to 2024, but now it's gone again, so don't plug your Blu-ray player directly into your LG TV if you have a soundbar or an AV receiver that supports DTS audio. Mm-hmm. This also means no DTS audio from the built-in Disney Plus app, but that was actually always the case. Even in 2023 and 2024, models that did support DTS audio, they did not support the IMAX Enhanced profile, which is what Disney Plus uses, so no actual changes there. But
yeah.
It's just all very silly. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, it just...
They're paying the licensing to Dolby, right? So, I mean, how much is the DTS licensing that they don't want to pay it?
I mean, it goes by the whatever chip they're choosing to put in there. So it's a little bit to the chip supplier's decision as well. Of course, they're going by what the market demands. But yeah, there seems to be this sort of flip-flop every couple of years because LG isn't the only one. There's other brands like Samsung has not supported DTS forever, which is a little bit strange since they don't really seem to get along with Dolby either. But they've chosen to support Dolby on the audio side of things. They just refuse to ever put Dolby Vision into Samsung's. But yeah, they haven't supported DTS pass-through basically for the whole past while. So Sony seems to be pretty good about keeping DTS support in their televisions. But yeah, it can change from year to year as far as TCL and Hisense go. Again, it just depends on their chip suppliers. So I mean, clearly, it's not a gigantic priority for any of these companies. They're not like, we've got to have the DTS audio pass-through support or else our customers just won't buy our TVs. Clearly, the market has indicated that is not the case, and they're not too worried about it. And, I mean, how big of a deal is this really? Well, I mean, it's primarily for Blu-rays, because even, in the case of Ultra HD Blu-ray, I mean, there's a handful that only have DTS-X, but the majority have gone with Dolby as far as Ultra HD Blu-ray goes. Back in the DVD days, it was predominantly Dolby Digital. There were a few DTS discs, but they were many fewer. It was Blu-ray where DTS HD Master Audio was actually the majority of discs instead of Dolby True HD. So it's predominantly, if you are still watching a lot of Blu-rays, 1080p Blu-rays, and then... I mean, you're not really going to worry about it if you were using the TV's built-in speakers. It's not going to make that big of a difference which audio format you're using. So this is, I'm connecting it to an outboard soundbar at the very least, or a full AV receiver with surround sound or immersive audio, more likely that you actually care about that. And then you would have to be in the case where, I mean, are there any soundbars or AV receivers that can't pass a Blu-ray video signal through? Because, I mean, that's not 4K 120 or HDR, So, I mean, you'd have to go to a pretty darn old soundbar AV receiver where you couldn't plug your Blu-ray player into the soundbar or the AV receiver and then pass the video signal along to your TV. So, ultimately, for a matter of convenience, it's a slight annoyance that you can't just plug anything in whatever direction that you want and know that it's going to work, like you could for the past 2 years with LG TVs. But in terms of, is this really a make or break type of deal breaker thing, I would have to say no. It's a minor inconvenience at most.
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah.
So TCL showed off their full TV lineup for Europe and the UK, so the lid is off now. Although the North American lineup will have slightly different names and be a little bit different on the for the top-end models. We've already seen the QM6K series released in North America. In Europe, it's the C6K series with sizes from 50 to 98 inches. It's got mini LED backlighting with local dimming and targets 1,000 nit peak brightness. The QM7K series is the C7K series in Europe.
Yes, so take away the QM, put in a C instead, and now you know that it's Europe instead of North America.
And this does appear to be the only series that will have the new 115-inch screen size model. Reps from TCL have said they are aiming for it to cost half as much as the QM891G, a 115-inch model from last year. Once prices settle down a bit later in the year, 3,000 nits is the peak brightness in this series.
Yeah, so they didn't make it explicit whether that QM891G is just carrying on. The new 115-inch QM7K in North America, I've already seen it listed at $15,000, which is $5,000 less than the QM891G was going for. The QM891G was MSRP of $25,000, and it rather quickly got down to $20,000. It has gone on sale for as little as $15,000 here and there. But the C7K MSRP is $20,000, $5,000 less than the QM891G right out of the gate. And then, like I say, it hasn't even shipped yet, and they're showing prices of $15,000 on that one. So for them to get to I guess it would be $12,500, right? If they're talking MSRP versus last year's QM891G, that seems very, very plausible that will take place. So yeah, I mean, we're a 115-inch flat panel TV for $12,500 seems to be where TCL is targeting this thing. So
which is like a JVC projector.
Oh, less than anything other than the entry level model.
115 inches. Do you know how much cheaper it's going to be to buy this TV and move your seats a little closer than this to be to get a
Unless you have to knock walls out of your house to physically get it in, because you can definitely bring in a projection screen and a projector physically more easily
that is true.
Than a 115-inch flat panel. It is not modular. This is all one big TV.
Yeah. So you'll never guess, but there's a C8K series, and it targets 5,000 nit peak brightness. Screen sizes from 65 to 98 inches. The C8K series is also the first in TCL's lineup to use the new WHVA, I don't know what that is, LCD panels. These are vertically aligned panels for much higher native contrast than the IPS. Which sounds so much like IBS. I just hate it.
But it stands for in-plane switching. VA is vertically aligned. IPS is in-plane switching. Yeah.
LCD panels, but similarly wide viewing angles, hence the W.
Yeah, so the H is a Chinese word for just their own branding from their TCL CSOT factories that they do there. So the HVA, the H just stands for their own brand name there. But the WHVA, that is wide, and then their brand name, and then vertically aligned. Yeah.
Exclusive to Europe will be the C9K series. The North American QM8K series will supposedly land somewhere in between the European 8K and 9K series. The C9K targets 6,000 nits, but only comes in 65, 75, and 85-inch sizes, and supposedly has a different anti-reflective coating while still having the WHVA LCD panels.
Yeah.
And finally, there's the X11K series. Will only come in 85 and 98-inch screen sizes. It has over 14,000 zones of local dimming with 7,000 nits peak brightness. If anybody other than people who listen to this podcast and the select few Redditors understood what local dimming was,
sure,
OLEDs would have to start marketing how many pixels they have, because that's what
8.19 million zones of dimming.
Yes, and then everybody would go, "That's a made-up number. You just made that up." And then they'd be like, "It's not. It's real." Not. But this is almost certainly what would happen.
Each and every pixel can dim individually. That's right.
But luckily, or whatever, because I've had many people ask me about TVs recently, and I'm like, "You care about local zones of dimming because they all want LCDs because they're cheaper than OLEDs," and they're like, "Well, what is that? Is it even listed anywhere?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's listed. It's there. It'll be there. You just have to look on the box. It'll say it on the box."
But I kind of like that in this lineup. They're like, the 6K 1,000 nits, the 7K 3,000 nits, the 8K 5,000 nits, the 11K 7,000 nits. I'm like, you could have just put those numbers into the model numbers. That would have been easier to track in a way. And then if you're curious about what's going on with just the naming over at Hisense this year, last year everything ended in an N. So you had like the U6N, the U7N, the U8N, and then so this year they've skipped some letters. It's all ending in Q this year. So it's like the U6Q, the U7Q, the U8Q over in Hisense's lineup, and it's very equivalent from last year's models to this year's models. Of course, they're ticking up a little bit in brightness in everything because that's what they do. But yeah, that's what's going on with the Chinese flat panel brands that are widely available throughout the world. And yeah, so I like it. It's well organized. It makes a lot of sense. And yeah, don't be expecting a QM 9K series in North America, but the RQM 8K series is going to have the WHVA panels, so you're going to get the wide viewing angles. And yeah, they'll probably say it's like 5,500 nits, just so they can say it landed right in the middle.
50 hours are break-in for optimal performance for apparently every speaker I've looked at on Arendal.
Yeah, they like the break-in. They do like the break-in.
So, see, it's stuff like that that makes me not want to buy your stupid speakers. You know, it makes it hard for me to recommend.
But it's also like we do quite generally like Aperion, and then they have their super tweeters, and it's just like
super tweeter. Get me started.
And like we definitely like SVS, but then it's like time alignment and bi-amping.
All right.
There's a criticism for everybody.
There's a criticism for everything. And I mean, if you can't find the criticism for me, you literally have not listened to me speak for 5 straight minutes. Because that's all it takes.
I can criticize Kef because it's like, really? You charge extra for the grills? I mean, come on, Kef. Come on. Charging extra for the grills. They're like, not everybody wants the grills. I'm like, just put the grills in the box, Kef.
They could take them off. Comments from listeners, or I guess just one comment here. We have a correction. Steve the Geek wrote in to say that he double-checked his front wide speakers with his Anthem AV M70 15.2 channel pre-pro. That's just a flex. He's just writing in the flex. And when using the Dolby Surround Upmixer, his Anthem does put sounds into the front wide speakers. Rob recently said that only Dan and Moran seem to be upmixing sounds into the front wides, but his Anthem is definitely doing it. So don't eliminate Anthem from consideration for that reason. I just want to say, I cannot tell you how many times somebody has written in to tell us that something is doing something, and then what it ends up being is that they've got some configuration going on that's making it do it that wouldn't normally do it. I'm not saying that's the case here. I'm just saying that
very unlikely in this case because the
just know that happens a lot. People are like, I have no problems with this. This happens all the time. Oh, I didn't realize I had it in an all channel stereo. That's not. Yeah, no, I don't. What's happening?
I don't think. And this, I believe, would have been the result of an update at some point because originally, I'm quite sure, like when it first came out, that was not happening. But yeah, there shouldn't be much reason why Anthem wouldn't be able to support that. So I'm very happy to hear that they are supporting it. I've always wanted them to. It is a little bit weird to me that of course I understand that like front wide speaker specifications are not going to be some kind of selling point to the vast majority of people. However, I would maybe argue that for the entire crowd that's looking at 15 channel processors, that is the crowd that might care about what front wide speakers do. And there is no mention of it. It's not in the manual. It's not on the website. It's not in their Q&A. I'm like, why is it so difficult to just get an official mention of it? Like, particularly in the manual, just be like, have the chart that says, okay, which speakers are active under which listening modes, and just have a checkbox next to the front wides when it shows Dolby Surround Upmixer. Like, that shouldn't be something you have to go hunting or talk to an owner and have them confirm. It's like, just put the information out there. That shouldn't be that difficult.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm happy to hear it. Also, for example, like Monoprice's Monolith HTP1, which when the heck is that thing going to get HDMI 2.1? But putting that aside, they rolled their own version of front wide and top middle matrixing, which I always appreciated. They did that early on before anybody else was doing it. So yeah, there definitely are alternatives to Den and Marantz in terms of processors out there that do front wides. However, Yeah, I mean, Steve couldn't confirm because he doesn't have like an Anthem AV receiver. He has the pre-pro. So he's like, well, I'm not 100% sure that they're 15 channel processing capable AV. I would assume that it is because it's based on the same platform. But even that is an assumption that we're making there. So in terms of AV receivers that do the upmixing into the front wides, at least we know Denon and Marantz, if they support front wides, that's the safe bet. They'll do the upmixing.
Yeah. The reason why the mono price is not getting an update, I believe, is because they still have stock, and until they sell it all, they're not going to update it.
It's been out of stock many times in the past, but that is a ATI is behind that one, and ATI is not fast when it comes to processor updates.
Processors are hard.
Processors are very hard. HDMI, if you weren't familiar, is a headache when it comes to the programming side.
You're joking. It was meant to solve all of our problems, Rob. That's what I was sold when I saw the very first AV receiver with a HDMI connection in it back at CES or CEDIA a bajillion years ago. Believe me, that's what I was told.
I have to check back in on Emotiva because beginning of the year, they had their models on display with HDMI 2.1 boards in them only 3.5 years later than it was originally said they were going to come out. But I have to check back in if that's actually the case.
That doesn't sound like them. I don't know what you're talking about. Let's get to the questions. Greg recently bought himself an 83-inch LG B4 OLED. He mostly followed Routing's recommended picture settings. But there were a few nitty-gritty specifics he wanted to ask us about. So, and I will agree with whatever Greg says here because Routing's, while it will get you close, it doesn't necessarily touch everything that you need to do. So,
I mean, it definitely is easy to just be like, for someone who just wants to be in the ballpark and, quickly and easily to follow. I love being able to point people there. So, it's certainly not a criticism. But, he's like, okay,
But it is not the whole game is the thing. Yeah, because, anyways. So, what should the sharpness setting actually be set to? The default in the most accurate out-of-the-box mode, such as filmmaker mode, have it set to 10. He's seen recommendations to lower it down to 0 to make sure there's no edge enhancement whatsoever, but some people have said that 10 is actually correct on the newest LG OLEDs, and that going down to 0 actually artificially softens the image a bit now. So what's the truth? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I haven't performed my own calibration testing of this. I am relying on information I can find that's out there, but from very, very trusted people like Vincent Teo, who's superb at doing this type of evaluation. So he has set it down to 0 because he uses, not surprisingly, like the most rigorous test pattern that you can possibly get, which is like these concentric circles of alternating white and black that are 1 pixel wide. So if there is
normal picture setting, a normal picture you might see in almost any movie, it is an image that is often there.
It is quite literally painful to look at with your human eyes. But what happens is if there is any sort of edge enhancement or anything being manipulated in the signal whatsoever, including just things like the automatic pixel shifting to avoid burn-in, like that type of thing, what you'll see are these kind of like little rays that show up in these concentric circles because it's like pattern interference that's happening when any of these single pixel wide concentric circle lines have any processing applied to them. You'll end up with pattern interference. You'll get these little rays that show up. So to get that down to as literally as low as it can go, he does end up setting the sharpness down to 0. But that said, it seems like this isn't just a completely linear, like we're applying some edge enhancement and then more and more and more of it anymore. I don't know if this has anything to do with the AI stuff, the machine learning stuff that LG keeps touting and all that. But if you get away from the 1 pixel wide type of test patterns, for the, shall we say, more traditional sharpness setting test patterns that you'll find on like Digital Video Essentials or even the Spears and Munsell discs and things like that, 10 visually looks correct. So that's sort of where that's coming from. And that's more or less where I've landed on the current day LG OLEDs. I don't change that 10 sharpness setting. Because I don't know the precise reason why, but the people are saying like it actually looks like the image is softened a little bit when you turn it down to 0. I'm like, yeah, I agree. Like I can't actually explain to you exactly what's happening on a pixel level, because by that single pixel test pattern level, 0 is technically supposedly still correct, and yet just visually I don't know what they're doing with the signal. 10 looks correct on the traditional sharpness setting patterns. So to me that kind of matters more, because that is more akin to real world content. So yeah, I don't know. It's a bit I wish I could give you an even firmer answer than that, but my answer is I leave it at 10. That's where I think it just looks correct according to most sharpness test patterns that you're ever going to use.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for older LGs, LG OLEDs, Rob you once recommended setting the brightness black level up 1 click to 51 to avoid black crush. 1 click.
Yep. Not the default of 50. 51.
The guides for his B4 all say to leave it at the default of 50. Will he have to suffer having some black crush if he doesn't go up 1 click to 51? And would that apply in SDR, HDR10, and Dolby Vision? Let's all take a moment to mourn the crushing of the black levels of having it 1 click up or down or whatever. I would never care enough to even go find the menu to click it up 1, because it's not like out of 100, right? I mean, it's
the default is 50.
It's not
right
like
in the
out
middle.
of 52. It's like it's very. I just can't imagine this making that much of a difference. But whatever, go
on. So I'm in agreement with the current guides, and they are universally in agreement that 50 these days, from the 3s in 2023 to the 4s in 2024, and I have to assume the 5s in 2025s, although we'll need confirmation of that. 50 now is the correct setting. It's fine to leave it at the default. Now, kind of like that single pixel test pattern for the sharpness, OLEDs inherently have a tiny bit of black crush. There is essentially no way to get away from it unless you just always applied some level of voltage like old plasmas used to do, which means the blacks would not be completely 100% OLED inky black. I will absolutely take the 100% inky OLED black over literally the first signal level above black, still having technically that amount of black crush. But if you click up the brightness setting, the black level setting to 51, it over brightens it. It goes too far in the other direction now. So 50 is correct, but technically speaking, the very first 2 levels, video black and 1 step above video black, they are still crushed together in OLEDs, but everything else above that now becomes visible. So I will take that.
He still watches good old DVDs sometimes on a fairly regular basis, actually. It's kind of surprising how not bad standard definition DVDs can still look. It depends on the DVD, to be honest with you. Ratings mentioned that for low resolution content, you might want to try out the various super resolution, noise reduction, and smooth gradation settings, but they stopped short of making any firm recommendations. They also suggested that upscaling looks best with the sharpness turned up to 16.
That sharpness setting is just driving them bonkers.
Yeah, I can see that. So do we have any firm recommendations about those settings? He still watches... Let me start it again.
Yeah.
He still watches good old DVDs on a fairly regular basis. It's kind of surprising how not bad they look.
Yeah.
There you go.
But
Answered.
He wants them to look the best.
As good as
they
possible.
Possibly can. So yeah, my take on it is, first of all, the smooth gradation, I have no problem setting that to low. Again, outside of single pixel test pattern type of stuff, I haven't been able to see the smooth gradation set to low be a detriment to the image, in terms of like scrubbing away fine detail that you might still want to see. It's like, no, that's still plainly visible in normal content. Yes, you get down to the single pixel test patterns and you can show that it's smudging it a little bit. But in real world content, I don't have any problem putting smooth gradation to low. And yes, DVDs, with the color space that they're using, with the bit depth that they're using for color, it's like, yeah, you can see posterization, you can see color banding in DVDs sometimes when everything is being upscaled the way that it is, from 480 interlaced lines is what's encoded on the disc, up to 4K resolution. It's like, yeah, you're gonna get a little bit of color banding in there sometimes. So yeah, smooth gradation, I'm very happy to set to low and leave it there. I think it essentially does no damage, and it does help smooth out if there is any color banding at all. The noise reduction, the super resolution, I never turn those on. I leave those completely off. The super resolution is using some of that AI machine learning type of things to try and enhance images and that. I'm like, nah, it still makes artifact errors every once in a while, so that I leave off. The noise reduction just seems unnecessary. That was really coming from like the analog days. It's just not the case from DVDs. They don't have that type of noise present in them. So those I leave off. Smooth gradation low. The sharpness, again, I just leave it at 10. You know, it's not the 0. I guess subjectively, maybe it looks a little bit better on DVDs, potentially turned up to 16, but that at that point is doing some edge enhancement. Like unequivocally, it is doing some edge enhancement there. So I just leave it at 10 all the time. I don't think it's worth the hassle of changing it back and forth when you're switching from DVDs up to Blu-rays or Ultra HD or streaming 4K or anything like that. So I'd leave sharpness at 10 at all times.
All right. So this 83-inch OLED purchase was due to having recently moved into a new house. In his old place, he had a dedicated, fully light-controlled home theater room, but in his new place, it's a family room set up without full light control. He used to have a 135-inch projection screen using a BenQ HT3550 projector, which was a model we had recommended to him. And now that he's got to experience both, he's kind of two minds about the whole thing. His old BenQ projection setup was noticeably lacking in terms of outright black level and HDR brightness. The OLED totally beats it there. That's obvious. Yeah. But that projection setup really impressed him in terms of color and clarity. And then compared to most commercial movie theaters, the black levels and brightness weren't really that different at all. So truthfully, he was a little bit disappointed that the image from his new OLED did not completely blow him away. And he's feeling like maybe it's a tad overrated. I don't know how you can get there from there without having something wrong with the way that you're doing your OLED.
And I mean, some of that is the viewing environment too, right? Because he's like, now I am in a family room. There is ambient light. I think maybe if you had brought the OLED into your fully light controlled, blacked out dedicated movie theater and then sat close enough to it that the image size difference wasn't so readily apparent, then I think you might have been more, bedazzled by like, oh, when there's black bars, I just cannot see them. Unlike on the projector, it's like, oh yeah, I can see the black bars. They're dark gray. When a scene fades to black, it's like the TV is gone. You can have that, there's a pinpoint of light that is just floating in inky black space experience. But you don't get that in a family room with ambient light at all times because, the ambient light is going to be reflecting off the screen. The inks stay nice and inky black on OLED, much better than any other display type. The inks remain nice and inky black, but you just don't get the full experience of like, oh, there's just a thing hovering in total blackness of space when you have ambient light in the room. So I think that is playing a role in this too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
When I put the OLED in the same room with essentially the same viewing distance as my projector, the differences were stark.
Right.
And I mean, the raw light output was phenomenal in comparison.
Yeah.
To what I was experiencing, but
and
also
you
the
weren't even getting one of the
sharpness.
2000 nit type. You were under 1,000 nits, but holy crow,
like,
still very noticeable.
some, yeah, and then it was not as akin to going from a regular TV to an HD TV back in the day, or from VHS to DVD. But it was closer to that than it was to going, I don't know, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it was a pretty big deal.
This very much is a case of multiple variables have changed in your setup. So I mean, the screen size difference, very, very noticeable. Like, not only is he going to a much smaller screen from 135 down to 83, he's also sitting farther away than he was from the 135. So like the change in screen size is dramatic. Then you've got a very stark change in the ambient lighting situation, and you've changed the display technology. So that's a lot of variables to then conclude it was just the change in display technology that's responsible for my opinion. It's like, you got to consider all the variables that have gone into this. Yeah.
So he's not unhappy with his OLED purchase at all, no regrets, because his new living situation means that there's no enclosed room that can be dedicated to being a theater with full light control. And there's zero question that this OLED looks great under any ambient lighting conditions. But the huge change in screen size is really noticeable, and the better black levels and brightness do not fully make up for that. Not for him anyways.
Yep.
And that has led him to conclude that if he did have a dedicated room again, even if he could afford a 97-inch OLED, he thinks he'd rather have a 135-inch screen size again. You are dead wrong.
Yeah, that one.
I cannot. There is no world in which I can make an excuse for you where that makes sense. It does not. It does not. I'm sorry. It is just wrong.
You will need to sit closer to the 97-inch OLED to make the field of view the same. 135 is substantially larger than 97, but 97 is
115 is not. It's getting closer.
That's right.
And you can get. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That wouldn't be an OLED at this point. That would be an LCD with many zones of mini LED backlighting. But yeah.
So he's curious, particularly in my case, if I would have felt differently if the switch hadn't been from a 92-inch projection set up to an 83-inch OLED, but rather from, say, 120 down to 83. Would we still be saying that OLED is worth it over projection no matter what? So, okay.
Yeah, I don't think we've said it's literally no matter what. Size matters. It really
We have
does
recommended projectors over OLEDs or LCDs, even the big ones. Just like we were talking about earlier, I was talking about earlier with the 115-inch TCLs in comparison to a projection screen setup. You know, you can literally just move your seat like a foot forward, and all of a sudden you're like in the same.
With the 115 now being out there, and with the 115 actually being less expensive than the 97-inch OLED still, or at the very least the same price, because I have seen some of the 2022 97-inch OLEDs get down to $15,000 now. You know, but there you're again, screen size difference is coming into play. So I mean, with that being the case, I mean, there's there's people who are going for a 150-inch screen size. It's like, outside of a micro LED that costs well over $100,000, you know. So these things come into play, and there are definitely times where it's like, 150 inches, 160 inches. We have that person with 203 inches, but that was the right screen size for the type of room size and distance that they were going to be sitting. And it's like, well, you're gonna be getting a projector. What the heck else can you possibly get unless you have hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend and the crazy electrical bill of running a micro LED display at that type of screen size. So absolutely, projectors still have their place, but
yes, but he's saying would I recommend OLED over projection no matter what? The answer is no. I would never say that because the no matter what part. I mean, I would never recommend one over anything else, no matter what.
Right?
Because there's always a fringe case, even if we're being like completely unreasonable in our. I would never recommend a CRT. I mean, there's actually some situations where I would recommend a CRT. Well, and I want to do retro gaming and I want to experience it the way that my grandfather did with a lot of people ages today. Okay, get a CRT for that. But all things being equal, or even most things being equal, an OLED is better than the projector 100 out of 100 times. It just is.
Screen size aside, it is better in every other way. I mean, 135 down to 83, that's not going to be a situation. Like, if you still had the fully dedicated theater room, it's the size and the seating distance makes sense. Like, the setup of everything is like, that's the distance I'm going to be setting. I really don't want to move within 8 feet of my screen. I just absolutely do not want to do that. I want to be at 12 or 13 feet away from my screen. Like, even then, I'm not going to say, what you should do is change to an OLED at 83 inches because that's always better. It's like, no. Screen size absolutely is a big, big consideration. But if you were like in the situation of I'm staying in that same room, but now I have no light control, right? Now there's going to be ambient light at all times. I'd be like, well, I'm not going to recommend sticking with the 135 projector. I'm probably also not going to recommend going all the way down to an 83-inch OLED. I'm probably going to recommend to you the 115-inch or at the very least a 98-inch LCD because I don't think, out and out terms, screen size and price aside, that they actually are as good or certainly not better than an OLED. I will still take an OLED if the screen size and the price were the same. But no, we're not living in that world. Again, more than one variable, right? We are talking price is a consideration, size definitely is a consideration. But if you have no ambient light control, I'm not going to be recommending a projector. It's just not what I'm going to do. So I'm going to recommend something else. So yeah, there are different solutions for different situations. Simple as that.
That's right. John in Ireland. John is back. He's trying to narrow down which speakers he is going to get to replace his current setup, which is a bit of a mix and match system using the old Haybrook Center German speakers from a brand called Cat that are somewhat awkwardly in between floor standing and stand mounted size, plus an 8-inch ported Yamaha sub at the back of the room and one small 10-inch passive radiator Cambridge audio sub at the front of this room. That started to make what he thought were chuffing noises, and they certainly are almost certainly not.
Not technically chuffing, but it was making some kind of noise of some kind. Yeah.
Right. So he was originally looking at either ELAC Debut 2.0 or Polk Audio Monitor Series for his new speakers, and he really wasn't sure what subwoofers to get and whether he could keep the Yamaha sub and just replace the Cambridge or get entirely two new subwoofers, which is, I think, what we said. Mm-hmm. We stayed to go with the ELAC Debut 2.0 and suggested BK Electronics for you in the UK as a solid choice for subs, since the internet direct brands from the US cost so much more in Ireland. But then Sasi informed us how it's actually easier and cheaper to import from just about anywhere else in the EU, even though the UK is so close geographically to Ireland. And he suggested either Tone Winner or XTZ as brands for John's new subwoofers. John says Sasi is correct about the importing situation, which is great, I guess, because we certainly don't know anything about that. He actually bought his Denon X1800H receiver from Germany because of how all that works, and so that got him to look at XTZ for its speakers as well. So now he's back in the hopes that we can help him decide exactly what he's going to buy. Boy, it's really hard to talk and keep this cough drop in one part of my mouth so it's not making a bunch of noise. Now I'm not drooling all over myself as if
there's that part too. Yeah.
All right. He is open to using either floor standing towers or bookshelf speakers on stands up front. So he's narrowed down his options to 4 choices based on price availability. How far? He's not sitting very far away from these speakers, right?
No, not tremendously far at all. No, we could sort of see the reflection in his screen there, which so we don't know the exact distance, but it's not like miles and miles away by any means. No.
So he's narrowed it down to 4 choices based on price and availability. The ELAC Debut 2.0 f6.2 towers, which are selling for around €325 each. The XTZ Spirit 11 towers, which seem to be selling for around €500 per pair. And then the ELAC Debut Reference DBR 62 bookshelf speakers going for around €650 per pair.
Same price as the Debut 2.0 towers, but these would be the bookshelf in the Debut Reference series.
And Cambridge Audio SX60 bookshelf, also right around €650 per pair. Can we work our way through those options to help them decide which brand and series to go with? So the thing you have to factor into the price of the bookshelf speakers is that they will need stands. I mean, they just will.
True.
So the towers, especially in the case of the ELACs, the debuts, I mean, I don't actually know because I haven't looked at the back of these speakers in a long time, but a lot of times those speakers will, you'll have a very high placed port on the back. Let me look at the back of these things. And that high placed port, you can see they have 3 here. So one at the top, one in the middle, one at the bottom, which is that right? Am I seeing that right? I am. So, that can sometimes indicate to you whether or not there is actually the entire cabinet is being used. Many times in floor standing speakers, especially lower priced ones, you'll see one port kind of in the middle, kind of behind the woofer, if there's only a couple of woofers or maybe one woofer and a tweeter, it'll be kind of towards the back of that woofer there. And what that usually indicates is that below that, not too far below that, the bottom of the speaker is blocked off, and it's just a bookshelf speaker on an integrated stand. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that as far as I'm concerned. They should tell you. I mean, it's still a floor-standing speaker because it stands on the floor and it is a speaker.
That's right.
But you expect the entire internals of it to be used. I mean, you would assume that. even though maybe it's not. In this case, I mean, they have 3 ports is like too many. It's too many ports as far as I'm concerned. I don't know why there's so many ports in here, and it makes me think some of these are just for show. But you can factor into the fact that the floor standing speakers have integrated stands compared to the bookshelves. Does that make the bookshelves better or the worse? I don't know, but we know that the ELAC speakers, generally speaking, even frequency response, nice and flat. That's what they're going for.
Yeah, with a little bit of an intentional high frequency roll off that has been built in intentionally. It's not like it was a mistake or an oversight. They did put in a little bit of a high frequency roll off in there, which tends to make them less critical in terms of placement. Having that little bit of a high frequency roll off tends to give you a wider sweet spot, and it's not as critical whether they're towed in exactly right and all that. All of that, what you're coming from, the type of setup that you still have, like I'm just talking positionally in your room. And then just how sort of like reliable that we know that they are. I kind of end up leaning towards that ELAC Debut 2.0 setup. I think it checks a lot of boxes. Like basically, the chances of you getting those and being outright unhappy with them, I think is really, really low. I think the chances are very, very good that if you got those ELAC Debut 2.0 towers, especially now that they're on such a very good clearance price, that the 3.0 series has just come out, I'm like, playing the odds. If I'm gambling on it, I'm like, I think he's going to be pretty darn happy with those. I think it's unlikely he's going to get them, even with some compromises in the placement of, that he's got available to him and all that. I'm like, those are going to be pretty darn satisfying. XTZ with their speakers, they're not shy about the fact, like if you go higher up in their series, the more expensive ones, the Cinema series and that, they actually have their little cluster of 4 or 6 tweeter drivers that they use. But not all of those are acting as tweeters necessarily. Some of them are like a joined together mid-range driver, and then only one of them is there. But XTZ has never been particularly shy about saying that they try to shape the dispersion of their speakers a little bit, like not overly so, not to the point of like really becoming beamy or acting like electrostatics or something like that, but they're not shy about saying like, yeah, they try to have a little bit of a shaped dispersion, which is not necessarily completely symmetrical or even. They're kind of trying to take into account, okay, everybody's going to have walls, everybody's going to have reflections, and maybe we'll do a little bit of shaping to the dispersion on those, which can lead to it's like one of those things of, well, if you didn't experiment enough, then whether you like them or not is kind of on you, the customer. And I'm like, I don't always love that, like as a recommendation. It's kind of like, okay, I'd rather have the one that just kind of sounds good regardless of placement when we know that this is like a shared space. It's a living room space, right? This isn't a dedicated home theater where you can move everything to within a fraction of an inch and have it always stay there. He even mentioned how like that front right speaker, when they do need to open the door that's behind the TV, it's like that front right speaker gets moved. I'm like, you're just going to have an easier time with the ELAC tower. That's kind of my opinion of it. The debut reference, I don't know that I've been they're by no means bad speakers. It's not, I'm not saying, I've never quite understood the value proposition of those because they cost as much as the Unify series. And I'm like, if I was going to pay more for ELAC speakers, I'd get the Unifies more than I'd get the debut reference. I haven't totally understood that. It's a very limited number of speakers in that debut reference as well, and I don't think those were an Andrew Jones design on those. I was a little bit confused about why the debut reference like kind of existed. I think it was more about the finish look on the outside looking different than the rest of the debut series than it was the rest of it. Now the debut 3.0 has kind of rolled both of those finish options into the single series. There isn't a debut 3.0 reference option, right? I think they've kind of rolled it all together there. So I'm still ending up leaning to the debut 2.0 towers. The Cambridge Audio SX60s, I can't say I've heard them in person, but I saw a couple of the measurements, so like not exactly the flattest. It's like I kind of leered away from those. So all of that is to say, I think you'd be more likely to be happy with the debut 2.0 towers than any of the other choices. That's where I land.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at the rest of the stuff on here. Yes. Yes, I agree with Rob.
Okay.
So he still hasn't made a decision on which subwoofer model to get. Either Tone Winner or XTZ do seem like a good option when it comes to price to performance ratio. And these strong opinions on where as to what he should get. So that's what I was looking at. Actually, I was looking at the subwoofers on this site. I mean I don't remember what his price point was. But
he didn't actually say outright. I mean, he wasn't looking to spend crazy amounts of money. We know that.
Yeah, but I feel like, so there's definitely, like that big tall one.
Are we talking Tone Winner or are we talking?
Yeah, I'm talking about the XTZ.
Oh, XTZ, okay.
As you say. The big tall one that they have on here is like $2,100. I mean, so
I don't think he was looking at that sort of price.
I don't think he's looking at that.
They had the Edge 12.17 model, which was listed for 600 euro.
Okay.
Yeah, very reasonable price, but it's not in stock. It's not in stock, and I don't know exactly where you'd be able to buy that one. The one that is in the same series, the Spirit series, they have a 12-inch subwoofer model in the Spirit series, but that is like a 30 hertz extension sub, and I'm like, I'd kind of like you to get a bit better than that.
Well, even that sub 12, whatever it's called, 12, 17, or whatever it is, I think it rolls off at like 25.
It starts rolling off at 25, yeah.
Yeah, it's really...
So I'm for all of those things, performance reasons, right? I want you to get maximum bang for your buck here. I think Tone Winner, that's probably the way I would lean, since I've if you were buying everything from XTZ, there is kind of something to be said for just the ease of having everything in your cart all at once and it all arrives at once. And if I was really strongly in favor of the XTZ speakers, I might have been like, okay, try to get the best choice of the XTZ subwoofers at the same time. There's a little bit of that going on. But yeah, since I'm I think I'd rather you get the ELAC Debut 2.0 towers for your fronts, and then they have a nice selection in that Debut 2.0 lineup of every other type of speaker you might need. If you want on-wall mounting for your, say, surrounds, or if you have surround backs, if you want wedge shaped, all of those are options in that Debut 2.0 series. So everything else that you might need to go along with it is also available. And given that, I'm okay, I'm not going to recommend one of ELAC's subwoofers. They are definitely, I would say, kind of underperforming for the amount of money that they're charging for those. So I end up on Tone Winner. Now the thing here is, if you go, I would be getting a 12-inch sub from Tone Winner. And they basically have two models. Both of them actually are ported. They have the SW, the 2000, and then the SW 4000. And despite those names, they are both 12-inch subwoofers. And they are both ported, even though the 2000 kind of looks like a sealed one. It's basically a 17-inch cube, but it has a slot port on the back. So it is still a ported model. But it is a smaller cabinet, which means that port tuning is at a higher frequency. And it's fairly similar to that XTZ 1217, the Edge 1217, in that it starts to roll off at 25 hertz. It is outputting sound at 20 hertz. It absolutely is outputting sound.
Both of them are, but the other one was minus 5 dB. It's significantly lower.
Yeah, so the Tone Winner, the SW2000, it is starting to roll off at 25 hertz, but is definitely still outputting sound at 2000 hertz. It is unequivocally outputting more and lower than either of the two subs that you have right now. By a very noticeable amount. And I was a little bit drawn to that just because I'm looking at the space you have available. And 17-inch cube is not small. Realize how big a 1.5 cubed is. It's not a compact sub, but I think that does physically fit more easily than the SW4000, which is a big honkin' 12-inch sub, and that one is flat down to 12 hertz, 20 hertz rather. If that's absolutely what you're going for, it's that's how you do it, right? That's how you keep the price reasonable, but the extension and the output low extension and high output, but keep the price reasonable as you put it in a big old honkin' ported box, and that's what the SW4000 is. So both of those are in the 2000 is the 700 to 800 euro type of price range. The SW4000 is getting close to 1,000 euros. So there's a price difference as well for that larger cabinet, and the shipping that goes along with it. So I think that SW2000 really sort of compromises in exactly the right ways. So if that helps you, that's the one I would nail down. So some ELAC Debut 2.0 speakers, a pair of Tone Winner SW2000 subs. That's a really nice system for a living room. That's a really nice system.
Would remind you that we often recommend, and will recommend in this case as well, to build a cardboard box
Build a model
of the size of the sub. Do not take a tape measure and go, I don't know what imperial units are or what, freedom units or whatever we're calling them these days. Build yourself, look at the website, take some cardboard, build yourself a box in that size.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Maybe just so that you can physically put it in the room and go, ooh, or go, oh, hopefully it's the second one. Yep. So it will make a difference. No, you cannot do it. You cannot envision it. You will not envision
even if you put
it.
a little tape measure out there and then you try to hold that in your mind, it's not the same.
And what I did when I bought my first subwoofer is I think I actually didn't ask my wife, but before that, because I changed the subwoofer order at the very last second. But before that, I had a subwoofer in mind, and I took a tape measure and I held it up, and she was in the room with me, and I was like, "Does that look like it's going to be too big, or does that look like it's going to be too small, or not too small?" She would never have said no to that, but does that look like it's going to be too big? And she agreed that it looked fine based on the tape measure, and then when I ended up ordering a bigger sub anyways, and then also. It was very much too big, and it was an Axiom AP8, whatever it's called, EP500.
EP500, which is by no means the biggest sub out there.
No, and it has very sharp edges. Don't get that.
It does.
Lee Overstreet. It's been a while since Lee has been on the podcast, so he just wanted to say that he's happy to hear Rob's aunt has settled into a new living arrangement and is doing reasonably well.
Thank
and for
you,
any
Lee.
AVRant listeners who may have been wondering how Lee's mom is doing, he's happy to report that she has shown considerable improvement. After she had surgery on her leg but was experiencing setbacks throughout rehab, she ended up having a second surgery, and thankfully this time rehab went much, much better, and now she barely needs to use a walker. So she also has much less pain now in every way. She's just looking and sounding much better than before, so good news indeed.
I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you, Lee. And I'm sure people do appreciate that update, because people do wonder when they hear about things and then they don't know the end of the story. So that's lovely.
He has a question for us. He was watching NCAA March Madness basketball tournament. I don't know why you would do that. Basketball's boring. And I'm sorry. I know some people out there really hang their hat on basketball.
I was going to offend people with that Conclave review, and now you've just really stepped into it.
I've really
the basketball people
just alienating people left and right. It's kind of my job. And since he isn't subscribed to any cable or live TV streaming service at the moment, he was happy to find them being streamed live on the Max app. But he wasn't entirely satisfied with how the games looked. The frame rate seemed to be capped at 30 frames per second. The resolution was fine, but motion looked somewhat choppy, and he's particularly sensitive to noticing any non-smoothness to the motion. He'd have much preferred lower 720p resolution at 60 frames per second, or just regular HDTV at 1080i with good interlacing. But the thing is, he was either using the built-in Max app on his LG OLED, which is a 2018 model, or using a Roku device, but that is also from around the same year. And when he switched to other sports on the Max app on either device, they all look the same, with the frame rate capped at 30 frames per second. Is he just assuming this, or does he have some way of measuring it? Because it sounds like something Lee would just decide that was what was happening, and then we all have to agree with him, and then try to fix this problem that isn't actually the problem.
I will say Lee is really, really good at spotting what frame rate is going on and whether it was originally interlaced or if
I don't trust anything that comes out of that man's mouth. I'm sorry.
He is really, really good and accurate at spotting those things, but I don't know the exact situation. I don't think it was actually like output in a data sheet or something like that.
Yeah, like I was just wondering. So, do we happen to know if this is just a limitation of the Max streaming service, all sports capped at 30 frames per second, or is it due to the age of his devices? And if he were to get a newer streaming box of some kind, he'd be able to get a higher frame rate from Max when watching live sports. Okay, before you answer this question, let's remember Lee is a curmudgeon.
True.
And a Luddite.
For something,
and he hates change of any sort. So the fact that he has identified something that he feels is annoying enough to have him upgrade something in his. We should take advantage of this and make him upgrade everything. Let's just say that in order to get good sports, he needs to get... Well, he's already got subwoofers finally, but we need to get him to upgrade a bunch of other stuff too. So make sure you do all that while I go to the bathroom because I just drank like a gallon of coffee.
Yeah, I mean, if you do, Lee, go out and buy yourself an Apple TV 4K from Best Buy or something like that, you can return that. You could give it a try and return it, because that, honestly, I don't know for sure. I'm not exactly sure with the Max app, because I mean, I went searching for this and I couldn't find anybody whom I would reliably trust to be able to say that this is exactly what's going on with the frame rate there. So the only thing I would say is, you could. If you were going to get a new streaming box, it would be an Apple TV 4K. So buy it from a place where you can return it and maybe give that a try to see for yourself. That would be one experimental way to do this. But if that doesn't do it, if it's still having the exact same frame rate look coming from Max when it's live sports that they're streaming, this is where on your LG OLED, in those clarity settings where normally we absolutely turn everything off, the true motion settings that LG calls it, because we don't want frame interpolation, they do separate out what they call the de-judder and the de-blur. And so turning up that de-blur, or even actually turning up the de-judder in this case, because this isn't sending what was originally a 24 frames per second signal and then giving you that really weird soap opera effect look. This is an originally video, either 1080i 60 fields or 720p 60 frames, like whatever the original was. So it's not coming at that 24 frames per second type of rate. So turning up those clarity sliders specifically for this content would look perfectly fine for this, and that might be enough. I know you will know, so in the back of your head you're going to be like, that's not exactly the same as the source having original smooth motion. I've now used the processing in my TV to fake it, and that might be enough to just throw Lee's mind into the realm where he can't tolerate it. But that would be the practical solution here, is actually make use of that de-blur slider.
Yes, that's what I said.
Okay.
Also, you need new speakers and a new TV. And more acoustic panels. Tell your wife I said that the only way to get the TV to look right is to have a lot of acoustic panels in there. I will say, I have a friend who is a listener to this podcast, and his wife, unfortunately for her, is also a listener to the podcast, because he makes her do it. Mm-hmm. Well, I think they're driving in the car and he listens, and she's like, "Oh my God, I can't listen to this guy anymore." And now we've met in real life, so she's met me, and she really doesn't want to listen to podcasts anymore. She sent me a bunch of angry texts, and apparently it's because he's using me as an excuse to get a bunch of acoustic panels. So acoustic panels are in his future, and it's all because of me. It's like, well, you got your way, Tom. I'm like, yes, I did.
That's right.
What happened? What did I do? I'll take the blame,
Congrats.
but also I like to know what I did. Tony, a few episodes ago, Tony asked us whether he should use several bats of 12.5-inch thick fiberglass insulation to more or less cover his entire front wall, since he came across a very good sale price on some insulation that thick. We responded under the assumption he was going to put this thick insulation in his home theater room, where he had already covered his entire back wall and front corners with in rock wall insulation, but it turns out he was actually asking about a completely separate room. It's disturbing. What are you trying to do, dude? It's actually in my basement.
No,
it's for my other family.
It's even got a ceiling fan in here.
It's a 10 by 12 foot spare bedroom that he mostly uses for meditation. But since he has some excess audio equipment, he figured he'd also use it as a dedicated listening room. And since he prefers to have instrumental music playing when he meditates anyways, it made sense to try to address the acoustics of the room. Okay. Less creepy, but also whatever. So he has started by bringing in just a pair of tower speakers and one subwoofer, and thank God. He brought in a subwoofer and tower speakers. Lee, are you listening to this part of the podcast? Because that's how you should have started with your home theater 20 years ago. And even though we talked about some specific that didn't actually apply in this case, our mention of how insulation that thick would help a bit with frequencies below the normal crossover point to dual subwoofers convinced him to go ahead with it, since he's only using one subwoofer in this room, as it turns out. He had also purchased a nice 10 by 10 rug with thick insulation stacked, and with the thick insulation stacked and freestanding at the front of the room, he was able to conceal the remaining floor that the rug didn't cover. So he likes the way that looks. There you go.
Yeah.
You're going to see some pictures here, and some of you are not going to like them, but I think that they are a interesting solution to this problem. Yeah. He was finding, so go to the Flickr album or go to the YouTube.
That's right.
He was finding that when the HVAC kicked on, he could see it moving some fibers from the insulation into the air. So he put a 1 mil plastic drop cloth over that stack of insulation to suppress that. And when he put up a sheer curtain to visually hide all of it, as well as the window, that's now behind the stack of insulation. And then he put up one. Anyways, I don't see the drop cloth. Is the drop cloth
it's
not
in
here?
the photos? We can't see the drop cloth in the photos. Yeah.
I mean, so anyways, think how meditative you'll be with some fiberglass in your lungs. You'll be fine. And he took some R60 measurements and was pleased to see that they had come down considerably. It's now quite even at about 400 milliseconds across the audible frequency range, and he really noticed a difference in the way it sounds in this room now. The most surprising thing to him was that he really noticed added depth to the soundstage. He's never really noticed that before, but now he gets what the 2-channel audiophiles have been talking about, what they mentioned soundstage depth, so he's glad he brought in this thick insulation. Sure, whatever. That 1 mil plastic drop cloth definitely does not pass the breath test for being acoustically transparent, but he's also clearly hearing and measuring a big difference in the room's decay time, so safe to assume the plastic drop cloth is not adversely affecting the sound absorption capabilities of the insulation. Would it still be better off replacing the plastic drop cloth with acoustically transparent fabric covering of some kind? So the drop cloth is not going to stop the bass and most of the mid-range. It will stop some of the treble.
Yeah, I mean, it'll just reflect some of the treble.
Reflect off of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So would I get something else? And the answer is yes, I would. But that was because I'm neurotic about it. And I figure if I'm going to do this, I might as well do it right. You've already kind of answered your question in that you're noticing that it sounds a lot better in here. Yeah. And therefore, do I really, if you make a change, will it sound even better? The answer is probably not. It's probably going to sound about the same to you because it's only the highest of high frequencies.
Yeah, like the only thing you might notice is that it actually sounds a little deader, right? Because there would be some more high frequency absorption happening without the 1 mil plastic drop cloth over there. Now, I mean, of course, you don't have any speakers that are like physically facing where this insulation and drop cloth are. So it's only going to be high frequency reflections that have already reflected off of some other surface in this room and then made their way back to the front of the room. So, I mean, the chances of you hearing it are low. But if you did, it would just sound a little bit deader. So, I mean, I think that's enough for you to decide for yourself. Like, would you prefer that it sounds a tiny bit deader in this room in the high frequencies, or if you're happy with the way it sounds now, there's no need to change it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I probably would myself, but I wouldn't blame. And I would often recommend that you not do it, especially since I think the drop cloths are going to the front of it, so things bouncing around, they're going to get behind it anyways. So the sheer curtains in this room do pass a breath test. They definitely don't present any sort of acoustical problem. But in his home theater, he has full 100% blackout curtains, and those do not pass the breath test. The blackout curtains in this theater are visually covering the rock wool insulation, so would it be better to replace the blackout curtains with sheer curtains that are acoustically transparent?
No. I'm sure you put those blackout curtains in there to make them blackout.
There's got to be a reason. And you can see what's happening in this room.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at the pictures, you'll see it too. I mean, the light from the window is clearly passing through.
Yes.
And I would care more about the black. Again, you're just going to be reflecting a little bit of the high end.
And even then, the curtains themselves in that case, like they're not 1 mil plastic. They are, in fact, blackout curtains. So they're doing some high frequency absorption, and then the bass is still getting through them. So I'm even less concerned there with changing that out. And I would not give up the blackout capabilities of them at all.
So we might have noticed that the pair of tower speakers that he has in this room right now are all the way to the left and right walls, but that's simply because the new rug still wants to curl a bit and he doesn't have weight on top of it. Man, I hate that. So he put the tower speakers on the corners of the rug just to keep it flat, but it seems to sound good like this too. The 2-channel audiophiles would never abide you having speakers so close to the side walls, as they say to always have a good amount of distance from any walls to your speakers, and he was fully intending to position his front left and right speakers closer together once the rug no longer wants to curl up on its own. So, but should he maybe just leave the speakers this way? Is it possible this placement is actually helping in terms of reducing first reflection since he doesn't have any sidewall treatments in here? You are one person in a room. You know what I mean? In this case, you can position these speakers like I think you can position them however you want and face them directly towards where you meditate.
You could.
You know what I mean? That's what I think this is fine. And if they sound, I mean, you're talking about soundstage depth and how good it sounds and everything else, and leave them. You just got lucky. It's good.
Mean, this is 100% if you ever find the time and inclination, trial it answer. But in terms of just like on the theory side of it, there's nothing wrong with having your speakers over like that. You are going to have some boundary gain reinforcement in the lower frequencies, but you just put in a pile of bass trapping right behind these speakers, really, really thick, abnormally thick bass trapping for most people to consider. So you've mitigated some of that to a pretty good degree. You don't really have a corner anymore. This is more like placing it next to one wall and the floor, which is pretty common, right? Normally we'd have the speakers pretty close to the front wall with maybe 4 inches of insulation behind them and then a distance from the side walls. You've basically just done the reverse, right? So there's nothing particularly wrong with that, even theoretically. So if this sounds good to you and you don't want to bother with the time and that it would take up to trial it, then I'd leave them alone. I'd be perfectly happy with that.
So as mentioned, he likes to listen to music while he meditates, and he actually prefers Dolby Atmos music tracks whenever possible. So his plan was to put a 4.1.2 configuration in this room. He already has enough gear on hand to make that happen without needing to buy anything new. So would we opt to run front heights or rear heights in this setup? This broke my brain for a second. Then I realized it's 4.1.2.
Yes.
The installation will be about the same in either case. I don't understand why middles isn't being discussed here, but I would opt to not do this at all, to be honest with you.
Yeah, use the Dolby Surround Atmos virtualizer, the height virtualizer.
That is exactly. I would point those speakers directly at wherever I was meditating. I would move them if I decided to move around the room. I would re-angle them, for like wherever my seat was. If I decided, I'm going to sit down, but I don't want to sit where I meditate. I want to sit someplace else. I'm going to point the speaker slightly differently.
Yeah.
Because you are going to be it. I mean, if it's more people than just you, take them into your theater and listen in there.
But yeah,
this
I guess
I would be 2-channel only.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't necessarily do 2-channel only. I wouldn't mind having 4 speakers in here. But yeah, I would probably use the Atmos virtualizer, the height virtualizer. If not, to answer the question directly, if I only had 2 overhead speakers, they would not be rear heights. So if the only choices are either rear heights or front heights, for me, they would be front heights. But yeah, I would definitely consider top middles, and that doesn't necessarily have to be on the ceiling. It could be on your side walls, the same way that front heights or rear heights, I'm assuming he was planning to mount on either his front or back wall. You could mount them on their side walls and call them top middles.
Yeah. I mean, that's fine, but I would just not do that anyways, whatever. Nathan. Last week during our In the News segment, we mentioned the new HDR by Barco cinema installations and how HDR by Barco targets 300 nit peaks for HDR, which is almost 200 nits brighter than Dolby Cinemas. We also noticed how that 300 nit target is the same as what the Samsung Onyx micro LED cinema displays use. Let's just make sure that we know that Rob noticed all these things. I noticed none of it. So we speculated that it wasn't just a coincidence, and it would make sense to share a specification with other types of HDR cinema displays so that studios might see more value in it. Well, Nathan noticed that there is a 300 nit specification right in the current DCI HDR standards, so that all lines up. And he figures that it might result in more and more ways of achieving that standard in more and more theaters as time goes on. So if that ends up being the case, what do we think the chances are of ever getting those same 300 nit DCI Cinema HDR graded releases at home with our 6,000 nit TVs?
Well, obviously he's thinking of projectors at home. That would be the application.
He isn't holding his breath, but he does think it would be very nice to have an actual industry-wide standard for HDR for home cinema setups, projection setups. Right now, every home projector manufacturer is just making their own decisions about how to handle the tone mapping. But wouldn't it be nice to just bring the exact same DCI HDR cinema standard home so that we can all enjoy a more consistent experience? What do we think? I think that there's too many variables when it comes to projectors.
Yeah, realistically, I really don't think it's going to happen.
You've got the throw distance. You've got the light output of the actual projector based on what mode you're using. Even if they made a DCI Cinema 300 whatever mode, you still have the screen that it's bouncing off of and its reflectivity. and everything that goes along with that. You have light control in the room, whether or not that's, I mean, could you do this? Yes, you could do this.
Theoretically, could be done. Yeah.
But it would be almost certainly through installers, because the installer would have to ensure that all the variables are met. And it's sort of like those, for a while, THX certified cinemas or home cinemas were around, and it was the same sort of thing. You want to make sure that, and that's the only way to do it, you want to make sure they're getting the exact same experience cinema to cinema, room to room. And you can't do that by just letting Joe Blow home consumer set up their own projector, bouncing it off a, off-white wall in their living room.
No, I mean, I see zero chance of the streaming services ever offering movies with a different HDR standard. And obviously, streaming is becoming the majority way that people are getting their content at home. There is no chance that physical discs are going to do this with either two different releases or two different masters on one disc. They are not looking to add any cost to disc releases, so it's not going to happen there. So the only place this could possibly come home would be Kaleidoscape. Kaleidoscape does favor projection setups, and they are going after a niche within a niche of the home market. But I don't know if Kaleidoscape, Kaleidoscape does their own sort of mastering from the mezzanine files that they get from the studios. So this would be a question of, do they see enough value to put the time and money into creating two different masters where you would get to choose which one you download on your Kaleidoscape system? That is the only possible place that might do that. And then that would still require that home projectors do end up going after this same standard, which is more than twice as bright as what HDR home projectors are targeting right now. Look, Epson's going to be happy. They brought out their 10,000 lumen projector that, costs considerably less than anybody else's 10,000 lumen projector. But everybody else, realistically, I don't see this ever happening for the home market. That's my real answer.
Yeah. Chris's son wants to get a new 65-inch TV, and he wants it to be a noticeable picture quality upgrade over his current 65-inch Hisense U6G TV from 2021. And since he isn't super into home electronics, he asked Chris, which has led Chris to asking us. If he becomes a patron, we will answer this question, because we are
untrue.
Well,
we're about to answer.
I don't
it right
understand
now.
how that even works. I'll be honest with you. Anyways, his son does watch a lot of movies. He uses PlayStation 5. It sounds like it's just going to be the new 65-inch TV being used, so its built-in speakers and potentially its built-in streaming apps and interface are also a consideration. Aside from the PS5, Chris's son would like to get a standalone Ultra HD Blu-ray disc player, and price is a consideration, although he's willing to pay for something good, which is code for he is absolutely not willing to pay for something good. He just wants it to be a good deal, hence I was just right a second ago. So he noticed that the new Sony A75L...
He just noticed that. It's not new. He just noticed that.
He noticed that the Sony A75L OLED is on sale over at Best Buy for $1,300. So was the Samsung S85D, but he's a little bit more interested in the Sony because name brand recognition is a real thing.
He's already got a Sony PlayStation,
But Chris wasn't totally sure. Is there a different OLED that would be a better choice? So LG makes all the OLEDs, I think.
In this case, because Samsung Display does have their Quantum Dot OLEDs, which is a totally different panel from LG Display's WOLED panels. But in the case of the Sony A75L, that was from 2023, so going back 2 years at this point, and it was the lowest rung OLED in Sony's lineup at that time, and it is definitely using a WOLED panel. It was the very same WOLED panel as you would have found in the LG B3 from that same year, or in the Samsung S85C, all from 2023. So, if we look at 2024 models that are also on clearance, you can find the Samsung S85D and the LG B4. So you already saw that the Samsung S85D from 2024 is also at $1,300. And then the LG B4 is on sale for $1,200. So it's $100 less. So all of these I'm going to basically call picture quality equivalent. You'd be splitting hairs in terms of picture quality difference between any of these. The change from the B3 to the B4, technically, I guess it got like 50 nits brighter, but it's like really nothing that anybody's going to notice. There is one very obvious difference among these, which is that the LG B4, all 4 of its HDMI ports are HDMI 2.1 with full 48 gigabits per second bandwidth. On the Sony A75L or either of the Samsungs, 2 out of the 4 HDMI ports are HDMI 2.1. Really doesn't matter when you just have one current generation console, but that is a clear difference. And then the other one is Dolby Vision. The Sony and the LG both do Dolby Vision. The Samsungs do not do Dolby Vision, but the Samsungs do HDR10 Plus, while the Sony and the LG do not do HDR10 Plus. All of these are under 1000 nit OLEDs. They look fantastic. Yeah. The HDR looks great, but all of them are under 1000 nits. So arguing that if you do a lot of movie watching, having Dolby Vision capability is not a absolutely does nothing scenario here. I wouldn't mind having Dolby Vision in this case. So I kind of lead towards either the Sony or the LG. The LG is $100 cheaper, looks every bit as good, has the 4 HDMI 2.1 ports. I'm kind of like, okay, if I'm just doing that, like there's not a tremendous reason to get the Sony over the LG in this case. You could save $100 and get the LG B4. The only thing that throws a real wrinkle into this is Samsung is clearing out their S90D, which is the quantum dot OLEDs, and they're only $100 more at $1,400 on sale. That S90D is legitimately about twice as bright in its peak HDR highlights as either the LG B4 or that Sony A75L. It is not an unnoticeable difference. That one you can notice. It is $100 more. You don't have Dolby Vision anymore, but you also don't really need Dolby Vision much anymore because it's hitting like 1400, 1500 nit peaks and doesn't have to do very much tone mapping at all. So being only $100 more and being legitimately about twice as bright in peak HDR highlights, it is a noticeable thing. So yeah, does he want the lowest price? Get the LG B4. Does he want noticeably better performance? Although if you don't have them side by side, how much will you know? About $100 more. The Samsung S90D, those would be my top 2 choices right now.
So I just want to say, and this is really important, that when you talk to your son, he says son, right? Yes. Mm-hmm. When you talk to your son about this, getting a new TV and plugging it in and then making an immediate decision about whether or not it has been worth the extra money. Because what he says is, I want something that's a noticeable picture quality upgrade.
Yeah. Okay. And all of these will be coming in their eco mode, which makes OLED look nowhere near as good as it can look.
And not only that, we just heard from somebody who was like, I went from a 135-inch screen to an 83 or whatever, and I don't like it as much. Well, I'm also in a different room, and I've got this and that and that. Okay, so there is a setup that's involved in getting something new. True. But if you want a noticeable improvement in your TV quality from one thing to another, what you cannot do is put it in a super bright room, never touch a setting on it, and then expect there to be some sort of magical improvement.
I mean, I'll still say you'll see the difference from an OLED versus a Hisense U6G. You'll still see a difference.
You'll see something, but will you think it was worth it? And the answer is, I don't know. Not if you put it in a really bad environment. So there, Chris, before I'll give this advice, I think you really need to show, basically explain, hey, these TVs, any TV needs a little bit of a setup.
Well, this is
if you're just going to throw it in your living room,
right,
and you're never going to close a window, and you're never going to turn the lights off, and you're only going to watch it, it can only do so much. It's like,
this is a perfect, I want to buy point them to ratings, right? Point them to Arting's settings, because that's the perfect scenario for this. It will absolutely get him close enough to the ballpark of really good settings. Yeah,
it is very akin to like if you said, okay, I want a noticeable improvement in my car, and you took out the V4 that's in there and you threw in a V12, but you only ever drove it around Key West. Okay. And for those of you that don't know, like the entire speed limit on Key West is like 15 or something. It's ridiculous. I don't know. I've never been there. I don't know. I know it's really low because it's a very small island and there's no place to go. So everybody goes very slow. So would you notice that improvement that you just spent thousands of dollars on? Probably not, because you're not doing it. You're not doing it right in order to let it shine. So that's going to be part of this.
Okay.
So which standalone Ultra HD Blu-ray player should his son get? And the fact that nobody makes them anymore is going to make this a lot easier to recommend.
Panasonic still makes them, yeah. So get a Panasonic UB450, 450. That's the one to get. If he does go with the LG or the Sony, it does Dolby Vision properly and nothing else does. So Panasonic UB450.
All right. Well, that's very exciting. We'll do that one. What would be a fair price to ask for that 65-inch Hisense U6G? Chris might even buy it from his son himself, since the TV that's in his own living room right now is only 55 inches. It's worth the price of the advice that you're giving for free, I guess, is what I would do.
I mean, just looking at where things are right now, so the brand new Hisense U6Q is showing up. The MSRP is $1,000. It's not going to sell for that much. The U6N from 2024, that's on clearance for $500 right now. So it'd be pretty hard to sell a used U6G from 2021 for more than $500 when someone could go just get a brand new U6N from 2024 for $500. It's going to have to be south of $500. I don't know, half of that? I mean, that seems low for a 65-inch TV, $250, but like, I don't know, $300, $400? I don't think you could ask for much more than that.
Good luck with that, by the way, because I don't see that happening. Used TVs are a dime a dozen. I tell you what, the easiest thing to get after my house flooded was TVs. People were literally throwing me TVs. We're like, we got this TV, we don't use it. It's in our spare bedroom. It's just taking up space, and I'd rather have you have it. I still have people to this day that are like, "Oh, did you guys need a TV? Do you guys need a TV?" I'm like, "No, I don't need your old, edge lit TV. Thank you very much." Juls in the UK. Remember that 80 by 80 warehouse and how Juls was asking about a pair of monitor audio bronze bookshelf speakers powered by a 2-channel Yamaha receiver might be enough to act as a sound system upgrade. I mean, compared to not having sound, I suppose it is an upgrade.
I mean, he was saying upgrade, so it sounds like he had something in there. And yes, we warned away.
Thankfully, he didn't go that route after hearing what we had to say about it. And he took it all in good humor and laughed a lot when he heard us explaining just how unsuitable those particular speakers would be for this application. It does look like they just rot in here, too. Let's be honest. This whole thing looks wet.
It did not look
top
like
to bottom, this place looks wet.
Right place for a pair of 6.5-inch woofer bookshelf speakers, not the correct application.
Those monitor audio bronze bookshelf speakers will get used in his work office instead, so that's a win for him. And as we said, they're nice speakers, just not for a wide open warehouse. So we suggested some options for outdoor rated speakers instead, including a recommendation from the Dayton IO8X in particular. I don't remember that, but I'm sure we did. They can be found and purchased in the UK, but they're a bit too expensive for the budget he's working with. But looking around the same places where he found those monitor audio bronze bookshelf speakers at discounted prices, he also found Monitor's own outdoor speakers also discontinued.
Discounted?
The Climate... Yes. Discounted, not discontinued. The Climate 80 model from Monitor Audio has very similar specs to the Dayton IO8X, and it's mentioned that it will produce 100 dB SPL from 4 meters away if you give it 100 watts per channel. For the budget that he's got, he'd be able to buy 4 of them right away. So do we think that's a reasonable choice?
I mean, it's way better than what you were considering before. It's much closer to being a reasonable choice. That basically means, 8 meters away. So this is a 25 meter by 25 meter warehouse. 8 meters away, you can get about 95 dB from them, which, that's nice and loud. If you're just doing announcements or something like that, 95 dB should be sufficient. But that's still 8 meters away. That's 1/3 of the distance of any, dimension of here. So having just
like 8 of these in here or something.
Yeah, like ideally.
Yeah.
Now look, 4 of these is way, 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 way better than what you were considering before. To the point of, I'm like, okay, you might not be able to get like 95 dB announcements going in here, for every place that somebody might be in this warehouse, but you'll be able to get something in the range of 89 dB, close to 90 dB coverage. If you don't put these in the corners of the warehouse, if you move them 10 feet, 3 meters or so from the corners, have 4 of them on 2 of them on each side wall, about 10 meters in, not 10 meters, but 3 meters in, from the corners, that type of thing. Like you'll get halfway decent coverage. Yes, I would rather have 6 or 8 of these speakers in here, but a budget is a thing. I understand that. So yeah, I'm much less worried about you doing it this way. If that fits your budget, these are a reasonable choice.
Yeah, I think most outdoor speakers are a reasonable choice, though.
Sure. No, but you still want reasonably large, reasonably efficient. But these
have brackets integrated in them, and they're IP55 rated.
That's right.
So they're going to last a lot longer.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're going to last forever, but they're going to last a lot longer than your potential other the bronze, which was rotted in a couple of days, or just died immediatly after being overdriven.
Those modern audio bronze bookshelf speakers would not have lasted in this warehouse at all.
So he still wants a receiver to power and to provide the power, and radio and DAB tuners all in one DAB tuners all in one. That's a UK thing. Shut up.
It is.
About it. He's found the Onkyo TX NR 686 AV receiver on sale, and his amplifier specs appear to line up perfectly with the Climate 80 speaker specs. So will it be a good choice for driving 4 of those?
Not an awful choice. Not a terrible choice.
I think it's as long as you keep that inside. Can that be inside? And because I wouldn't want this to be out in there either. I know people put I've had a receiver in my garage for 20 years. Shut up. So what? This place looks like it drips. So and let's also. We're looking at this, and there is a forklift. There is one.
Yep. They're not quiet.
Are you going to be able to hear the announcements over the forklift? I don't think so.
It's a reflective space. There's no acoustic treatments going on here. The water is acoustically, things, I guess, but that's making noise of its own. In terms of how much power those particular outdoor speakers can handle, the Onkyo 686 is not a bad choice. That could be okay. It doesn't have regular pre-outs for all of the channels, but it does have Zone 2 pre-outs. So even, I know it's a little bit unusual, but in the scenario of you do end up adding more of these speakers in the future, you end up with 6 or 8 of them, and you're like, oh, I could actually use a distribution amp at this point instead of just the built-in power. You could just use the Zone 2 pre-outs, and that'll drive the amplifier perfectly fine, because you're always sharing the same audio across all of these speakers. So there's no real capability drawbacks of going with that. Like he found one, it's somebody just selling it off. Like it was on eBay UK. Right. So I'm like, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, you can make this work.
You can make it work.
For sure. How much time do we have left?
We're pretty close to 2 hours. I'd love to hit one more if we could.
I think we can do Kevin.
That sounds good.
Question. So, Kevin, last week we talked about the HDR by Barco Cinema Projector and how existing cinemas could be upgraded without having to completely renovate the theater into a Dolby Cinema. And we also mentioned the new, smaller Christie Dolby Cinema Projector that is bright enough to use only one, instead of always needing 2, at least in smaller Dolby Cinema installations. But discovering some of the approximate price points, we're talking 400 on the low end to 500,000 being pretty common just for the projectors alone. How can this honestly be profitable for theater owners? That seems like a lot of ticket and concession sales needed to just get a return on that investment. And aren't the theater owners always saying that attendance keeps going down? How does this actually make financial sense? That is an excellent question. And the answer is, I don't know. Because obviously, Rob goes to the movie theaters maybe once a month, right?
Yeah,
is that what you said?
Like on average, there's some months, like during the summer, there's more blockbuster movies come out, so I might go twice. But yeah, other months I might go 0.
I go once. I guess biannually is what I do, basically. Once every other year, I go on average since my first child was born.
Sure.
Now, right before Noah, who's my first child, was born, we went to multiple movies over a weekend because we were like, once our kids are born, we're not going to be able to go to the movies as much, at least. And now they're too expensive, essentially. Once you have a family, it's insane. Even just having one extra person to go to the movies with, it's the concessions and everything else. It ends up being a lot of money. So we don't do that. So all I see is people complaining about the tickets prices and how they're not going as much as they used to because ticket prices, and they keep raising the ticket prices
Concession
because they need to
prices,
make, to make the money that they need to make in order for, and I like everybody says, well, they really make the money at concessions. They do, but they can't sell a movie ticket for $5 and then have the popcorn be 10. You know, they need to make the movie ticket price. Yeah, really. They need to make the movie ticket price such that when you walk in, you're already ready to spend an amount of money that is commensurate with that ticket price, at least in my mind. So they keep increasing all these prices in order to make their money, and then that reduces the number of people, which means that they need to increase the prices. It's a vicious cycle. What are they going to do? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the future is, because I really thought that, streaming would be it, but then they keep increasing the streaming prices, which I think makes sense. But at the same time, I can't afford it. So here we are again in the same sort of situation. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, the problem for someone like yourself, Kevin, is that you think in terms of reason and arithmetic. And reason and arithmetic have no place inside the walls of big business. Because this type of thing, these types of announcements, like when the theaters announce that they're upgrading their theaters to this new technology and stuff like that, that has nothing to do with their customers. It has nothing to do with arithmetic. It has nothing to do with an actual return on investment. The only thing it has to do is with increasing their stock price. They want to make an announcement with a bunch of buzzwords in it that will get some investors to make the stock price go up a little bit. And somehow that's all justified because all of these companies are in massive, massive debt. And the debt is only getting bigger, and the deficits in their budgets are only getting bigger. But if they can show that their revenue increased by however many points is enough to satisfy their investors to make the stock price go up a little bit versus last quarter, that's what it's about. And they're just constantly chasing their tails. If they actually sat down and did a calculation of whether or not the amount of money coming in versus the amount of money out makes any sense whatsoever, they'd come to the same conclusion as you and Tom. It doesn't make sense. It does not make arithmetic financial sense. But when all you care about is, can I convince some investors to make the stock price go up a little bit this quarter, and therefore I get my golden parachute as CEO when I inevitably, have to leave this business or sell it to someone else. That's all they care about. So that's why these things go the way that they do. It doesn't make sense.
All right, who do we have left?
We have Sasi left on the list. That's it.
All right, Sasi, we'll get you next week. We want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank our 132 patrons over at patreon.com, including John. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that is right. That is patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation, John just did last week. So thank you very much for joining in and becoming one of our 132 patrons over there.
And we want to thank those who sent us notes of gratitude, including John, Gurinder, and Sasi.
For sure. John, Gurinder, Sasi, thank you all very much for your notes of gratitude and encouragement. We appreciate them very much. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. If you want your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Antry. And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something. Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant. Now go out and listen to something.